Hello, my name is John Taylor. I'm a curator at the Department of Egypt and Sudan at the British Museum. 2022 marks 100 years since the discovery of the tomb of Tutankhamun, the Valley of the Kings. The British Museum is marking centenary with a special exhibition. And over the course of the next hour, I'm going to be having a conversation about this with two colleagues who've worked extensively on this project, Dr. Marie van den Busch, also of the British Museum, and Heba Khairi of the Grand Egyptian Museum. Egypt is actually in New York at the moment, and we're very grateful that she was able to join us. We're going to be discussing Tutankhamun Reimagined. That is the name of the exhibition, supported by the Asai Shimbun Foundation. And this exhibition is very much a review of how Tutankhamun is perceived today, and what kind of position does he have in today's society, both in Egypt and in other parts of the world. I'm going to begin by giving you a little bit of background, just to put Tutankhamun in his historical context, and then we'll go to Marie and Heba to hear about the work that they've done on creating fiction. Tutankhamun is probably the most famous face from ancient Egypt, and in fact, one of the most famous in the world as a whole. He came to the throne of Egypt at the age of about 9, around 1336 BC, and he reigned between 9 and 10 years, dying around 1307 BC. So he was only about 19 years old at the time of his death. He lived during the New Kingdom, the peak of Egypt's period of prosperity. But Tutankhamun actually came to the throne against the background of rather turbulent times. The king who preceded Tutankhamun was Akhenaten, who you see on the left of the screen here, and Tutankhamun, we believe, was his son. But although Akhenaten inherited a very rich and prosperous land, his reign was highly controversial. Egypt had previously had a very firm religious background with a pantheon of gods headed by Amun-Re, known as King of the Gods. But Akhenaten had very radical ideas, and he overthrew this centuries-old system, replacing it with the worship of a single deity. That deity was, he believed, enshrined in the solar disk, the disk of the sun, known as the Aten. And during his 17-year reign, Akhenaten had the temples of the old gods closed, the statues were destroyed, and everyone was expected to worship Aten. It was a very rapid and very shattering change for the society of Egypt, and it was a very unpopular move. After Akhenaten's death, within a very short time, his ideas were rejected, and there was a return to the old religion. And this happened in the reign of Tutankhamun. So the boy king was actually a restorer of tradition. Next. On the left, you can see a statue of Tutankhamun, which features in the exhibition. This was found probably in the temple of Karnak, the traditional home of the old king of the gods, Amun-Re. But in fact, we only know this is Tutankhamun because of the facial features, which are very distinctive of him. The name of the king was erased after his death, and this was done on the orders of the man who you see on the right of the screen, seated with his wife, is the General Horemheb, who was Tutankhamun's army commander, actually deputy pharaoh during the boy king's reign. And after Tutankhamun died, leaving no living heirs, Horemheb, after a short interval, became king himself. And because of his background in Orthodox Egyptian religion, he felt that Tutankhamun was tainted by his association with the heretic Akhenaten. Even though Tutankhamun had restored the old religion, he was the son of this much hated pharaoh. And therefore, Tutankhamun was effectively eliminated from Egyptian history. Horemheb took over most of his monuments, erased Tutankhamun's name, and put his own name in place. Next slide, please. And you can see what happened here on this list of Egyptian kings. This was carved about a century after Tutankhamun. All the oval shapes you see there contain the hieroglyphic names of Egyptian kings in chronological order. What is noticeable is that where two of them are circled in red, we jump from Tutankhamun's grandfather, Amenhotep III, straight to King Horemheb. Akhenaten and the next ruler and Tutankhamun have been left out. They've been airbrushed out of history. Because of this, very, very little was known about Tutankhamun until his tomb was discovered. Next slide. And so in 1922, the famous discovery was made by archaeologists led by Howard Carter. In the Valley of the Kings, there on the left, you can see the area where the tomb was discovered. And against all expectation, the tomb was found to be intact with all its original burial treasures, personal belongings of the king, still in perfect preservation. Next slide, please. Two more views inside the antechamber, the first chamber of the tomb. And you can see on the right there the sealed up doorway to the burial chamber, behind which lay Tutankhamun's mummy. Next slide, please. Encased in a series of gilded wooden shrines and a stone sarcophagus, and inside that a series of mummy-shaped coffins. This is the inner coffin made of solid gold. So the discovery was a transformational event in archaeology, and particularly in history of ancient Egypt. For the first time, it revealed the incredible wealth which went into the tomb of an Egyptian pharaoh. And of course, since the discovery, Tutankhamun has been a worldwide famous name. And this has been helped in particular by many traveling exhibitions of selected treasures from the tomb around the world, which began in the 1960s and went on several decades. So this is the background. This is Tutankhamun, his history, where he was in ancient technology. But what about Tutankhamun today? How is he now perceived? And in what different ways can we tap into public consciousness about this famous ancient ruler? So I'm going to hand over next to my colleague Marie van den Busch, who has worked on the exhibition that I mentioned at the beginning, and she's going to give you some background. Marie.
Thank you very much, John. So my name is Marie van den Busch, and I'm an Egyptologist and a curator here at the British Museum, and I mainly work on traveling exhibitions. So it means that I mainly work on exhibitions that I can barely see. So it was really a pleasure to actually be able to work on an exhibition which is now shown in the British Museum itself. And the exhibition starts by a small room when you enter in the exhibition on the right, which is room 3. So if you come to the British Museum, you can't really miss it. It's just here on the right when you come in. And as John said, we didn't really know much about Tutankhamun before the discovery of his tomb. And this statue that he already mentioned is really a very good example of that, because the statue was found before the discovery of the tomb, and the meaning of the statue and the identification of the statue remained very unknown and quite enigmatic for a very long time. It was found before the discovery of the tomb, and as John said, it was usurped by one of his successors, the King Horemheb. And it's only based on the facial features that you can see here, with this young face, a bit triangular, which is really emblematic of King Tutankhamun, that we can recognize the king himself. Like you have a nice different views of this statue, showing an almost 1-to-1 size. He was offering an offering table, which is now mainly unpreserved, but you can still see, and you have, I think here, yeah, a view on the left, some of those offerings that are still very, very nicely carved on the pillar of this table. And the image on the right, you can see the back of the statue, which shows this very, very nicely carved inscription, which names the King Horemheb, as we said, which led quite a lot of people to think that it was a statue of King Horemheb. But as John mentioned earlier, a lot of the statues and the monuments built by Tutankhamun were reused by his successor, by quite often just adding his name to the monument. And that's probably what happened to the statue. So why are we showing you this statue today? Because it was a bit our starting point. We wanted to try to see how a statue like that was completely perceived differently before and after the discovery of the tomb, but also what was really the impact of this discovery on the modern Egyptian society. And we wanted to try to create a dialogue between the perception of Tutankhamun in Egypt today and the ancient past. So yeah, we wanted to try to counterbalance this kind of newly gained fame of the king, focusing on how the discovery inspired generation of Egyptian and how he became a sort of symbol of national identity and of unity. And when researching for this exhibition, we had quite a long discussion with John, Heba, and me. And Heba at some point really made us discover ancient Egyptian street art. And I remember she showed us quite a lot of different murals that you can find the streets of Cairo, and in particular the work of Ahmed Nofal, and you can see here a few examples of the work that he's done, and a photo of him in the middle. And I have to say, we were all very taken by the work he's been doing, very inspired by pharaonic Egypt and how he actually managed to really convert this inspiration from the past to something very modern. And we were particularly amazed by this mural, which is in Zamalek, and you can still see this mural if you go to Cairo. And we started discussing with Ahmed first to see if he would be interested in collaborating with us, and if he were interested in the project we were putting together. And and see how we could correlate our idea of this dialogue and the work it's been doing. And from there on, we started, as I said, having Zoom meetings, and that's the joy of this online device. Zoom meetings and emails and so on, and he sent us sketches that he's been doing. And as I said, this mural was really the first link of this dialogue, and he created here a slightly different version, but he also created other types of images that we could reuse in the exhibition space. And you can see here, for example, a quite humorous view of, in a way, Ahmed himself in ancient times spraying temple reliefs on the walls, and this quite glorious view of Tutankhamun on its chariot. So there are quite a lot of different back and forth until we managed to really start the work, and we managed to move forward with this project. Ahmed came to London for a week and to do the work directly on the wall of room 3. And you can see here, we have just a couple of time-lapse videos showing his work. And it's quite interesting because it looks like it's going very, very, very quickly, but it's very, very intense work, and he really worked very, very intensely for over 5 days to cover the walls of the 3 walls of the room. But I think it just gives you an idea of how it works using quite interesting techniques of just line drawings, very quickly done on the background, and then just adding layers and layers and layers of paint and spray and so on, trying to finesse as much as possible the different images. And the result is this direct dialogue between the statue that I just mentioned earlier and the murals, and particularly this face, hip hop face, like he likes to tell us, of Tutankhamun in the background, which is really inspired by the mask of Tutankhamun. And you have another view here, which I find quite interesting in terms of contrast. I also quite like this idea of chariots, and especially in terms of the dialogue between the objects that were found in this tomb. And we know that quite a few chariots were found in the tomb of Tutankhamun. So there is really a clear link there. There are also quite a lot of theories of how Tutankhamun died. And one of them is that he might have a chariot accident. So there are quite a lot of different things here. Something that really, I remember when I came in the room, once he had completely finished his work, I was really surprised by the fact that I couldn't see his signature anywhere. And I was a bit surprised because I have to say that I thought he would sign his name somewhere. And at some point, I was also looking at the hieroglyphs, and you can see the column just at the back of the statue of Tutankhamun, and you have another view here. And I was wondering why those hieroglyphs and why they're repeated. And it took me a while, but I finally realized that those hieroglyphs here are actually his signature, and you can read it Nofal. So it's Ahmed Nofal. So it's his name. So I was completely mistaken. He actually signed his work literally everywhere in the room, and I have to say I quite liked it. So you have it here, and you have at the back of the chariot as well. You have quite a few different scenes. But if you manage to come to the museum, really have a look at the details, because he worked quite a lot on details something that he really built throughout the work. And I have to say, I found it quite fascinating to see how he built those images to get this very vibrant results. I'm going now to leave Heba telling us a bit about another part of the work that we've been doing as part of this display, and a few words about the international training program, which was really a project.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you, June. Good evening, all, and thanks for being here for our exhibition today. I am Heba Khairi. I am an Egyptologist and exhibition coordinator at the Grand Egyptian Museum in Egypt. And I'm also ITB fellow since 2017. And this is why at first I would like to introduce to you what is the ITB, or the British Museum International Training Program. Every year, the British Museum runs a skill sharing program for museum and heritage professionals from all over around the world. The ITB very keen to bring together heritage and museum professionals, which aims at creating a kind of civilized dialogue and cooperation between people from different cultures, different backgrounds, and different interests. It also provides a platform for demonstrating current museum practices and the projects by the fellows replacement for 10 days at one of the UK partner museums or the British Museum partner museums, which allows the ITB fellows to experience the regional organizations with strong community programs and their participatory approaches with local audiences. So through the ITB, the British Museum is very committed to building a global network of museum professionals crossing geographical and cultural boundaries. For more than 15 years, actually, this training program has changed and inspired the lives of hundreds of museum professionals. Through the working for the exhibition in room 3 or Tutankhamun reimagined, we were very keen to conduct a kind of focus group conservations and discussions in addition to collecting the data from Egyptians in the streets, in museums, in different places in Egypt. So we conducted many interviews with many people from different backgrounds, and one of them was Ahmed Nofel, who already Marie mentioned, and he is the creator of this iconic mural. So please enjoy this short video with Ahmed Nofel.
طبعا اول حاجه احنا لاحظناها في كل جدارياتك والجرافيتي الخاص بيك سواء هنا او اعمالك بره ان هي دايما مستوحاه من الحضاره المصريه القديمه. دايما انت بتصور ancient Egyptian figures، ملوك مصريين. فانا حابه اعرف ايه السبب في ان ده مسيطر على كل اعمال الجرافيتي بتاعتك.
طيب في البدايه انا شرفني جدا ان انا اكون بمثل جزء من ده في المتحف البريطاني، يعني حاجه شرف كبيره ليا. فكرة الجرافيتي المستوحى من القدماء المصريين بدأت معايا من فترة ما كنت بدرس في الكلية. كنت متأثر أكتر بمعرفة سيرة القدماء المصريين والقصص والحكايات. هو المصري القديم كان أكتر يعني بيحكي قصص، فده أكتر حاجة شدني لفكرة إعادة إحياء القصص بتاعت القدماء المصريين بشكل الجرافيتي المعاصر اللي موجود ومنتشر حوالين العالم. انا اصلا جرافيتي ارتست، بدات اعمل جرافيتي من 2009 فعليا. بدات انفذ جرافيتي على ارض الواقع من 2014 في مصر. كانت الاول حاجات سيمبل بيسز و يعني شويه تايبنج وحروفيات من الاسم بتاعي، وبدات اترجمها وادخل فيها جزء من الثقافه المصريه وثقافه التمثال بتاع توت عنخ امون والفيجر بتاعه اللي هو الماسك اللي كان اغلبيته متغطي بالذهب، وكان في تفاصيل كتيره قوي وتراكيب. لو ركزنا على القصه بتاعته هنلاقيها في الدقن المستعاره والتاج والمنظر ورسمه العينين. فبالنسبه لي هو كان حاجه مذهله. بالنسبه لي فكره الستايل بتاع توت عنخ امون اللي هو كده والوضعيه الملكيه بتاعته دي مثلت لي جزء كبير جدا من فكره ان انا ابدا استبدل العناصر اللي موجوده في ايديه زي العنخ والحاجات دي، ان انا ابدا ادخل انا بقى واحط البصمه بتاعتي والكاركتر بتاعي بفن الجرافيتي وفن الستريت ارت وبسيمبل بسيط جدا زي السبراي كان. فبالنسبه لي دي كانت حاجه مودرن جدا ميكس مع حاجه قديمه جدا ومستوحاه من ثقافه قديمه جدا. فظهرت الميورال دي اللي هي اللي تعتبر ايقونه من احدى وافضل الايقونات اللي انا سبتها، واللي هي ادتني ارضيه قويه جدا لما بدات اظهر وبدات انتشر في الواقع. غير زيارتي في فتره الكليه للمتاحف وكده، ان انا اكتر كنت بقرا كتب كتير قوي. كنت بشتري كتب عن الانشنت ايجيبشن وعن الدروينجز بتاعت الانشنت ايجيبشنز والحاجات دي. وكانت الكتب دي فعلا يعني انا كنت بجمعها وانا ماشي في الشارع، كانت بتبقى تتباع على الرصيفه وفي اماكن، وكتب كنوز يعني. بس اللي يفوكس عليها اكتر واللي يفتحها ويشوف التراكيب والنمط بتاع فكره تجسيد ورسم وتفاصيل تكوين الشخصيات والنسب بتاعت الرسومات والجداريات اللي اشتغلوا فيها القدماء المصريين، وازاي كانوا بيستخدموا الشبكيات في تجسيد نسب الجسم بتاع الكاركترات، وازاي ان هم كلهم على ابعاد واحده. فبالنسبه لي ده جزء تصوير الشخصيات والكاركترات والقصص في شكل جداريات 2D وفي شكل نحت بارز وغائر وفي تماثيل مجسمه 3D. كل ده اندمج بشكل كبير جدا مع الموفمنت بتاعت الهيب هوب ومع الكالتشر بتاعت الهيب هوب. فأظهرت الشخصية بتاعتي بشكل كبير جدا، وهي دي اللي مثلت الهوية والشخصية بتاعتي. فزي ما كنت بحكي برضو من شوية، هو توت عنخ آمون فوكس قوي عليه في البداية، وفوكس على الاليمنتس بتاعته من اكسسوارات لإلخ يعني. بس برضو أنا كنت مركز على القصص اللي خارجة من الخلفية بتاعت توت عنخ آمون أكتر، من عجلات حربية لمعارك لقصص اللي كانت.
So here for the photo on the right, we can see the logo for Tutankhamun reimagined exhibition, and we like here to explain how already also the logo is inspired by King Tutankhamun statue inside the gallery. While on the left, we can see here an explanation for the Tutankhamun trail. As Marie mentioned that the visit starts with room 3, for the exhibition, which is already mixed or integrated between very ancient statue and very modern and contemporary art or hip hop art. Then you can move to start moving through that trail, where we displaying some objects or some antiquities related to King Tutankhamun family or his origins. And Dr. June already has displayed some objects of the trail. Then the trail ends with room 4, when we can see the modern Egypt showcase, where the British Museum is always very keen to display artifacts or narratives that explaining or showcasing modern Egyptians nowadays. So within this showcase, yes, here, we can see here the modern Egyptian or modern Egypt showcase before our renovation for this case. Now we have our showcase. Here we can see a number of banknotes, Egyptian magazine, Egyptian story or child book, in addition to metal tin.
you're on mute.
Sorry. So here we were very keen to explain the modern inspiration of King Tutankhamun. We started with on the top, the banknote on the top, and it represents the first banknote to hold not only the King Tutankhamun, but to hold an image for an ancient Egyptian king. This banknote had been issued in 1930, which means after about 8 years of the discovery of King Tutankhamun tomb, and it was called at this time the English pound or the Egyptian sanad. Why it's the English pound? Because at this time Egypt was under the colonial power of the British Kingdom. Then after years, about 10 years, the Egyptian National Bank decided to change the photo of King Tutankhamun to King Farouk I, the Egyptian king or Egyptian ruler at this time. So in 1952, after the Egyptian Revolution, the National Bank of Egypt decided again to replace King Farouk I photo with King Tutankhamun photo for the next time. While on the right, we can see the Egyptian coin for £1, Egyptian pound, which is bronze and metal coin. And what is very good to mention is this coin in 1970 has awarded one of the most beautiful coins around the world because of the existence of King Tutankhamun mask on the coin. To the bottom, we can see the very famous Egyptian soccer player or football player, which is Muhammad Salah or Mo Salah, and he is merged with his half face with the half face of King Tutankhamun. And I would like to mention why is this kind of integration or mixture, as Egyptians consider Mo Salah or as a kind of a national pride, while British people called Mo Salah as the Egyptian pharaoh. So in 2019, this commemorative coin had been issued to celebrate Mo Salah as a kind of national pride and national pharaoh or Egyptian pharaoh, or a kind of a national hero. To the left on the top, we can see a child book, which is telling a story of King Tutankhamun. And what is very interesting about this story, this is the first story which had been issued by the Ministry of Antiquities and Tourism for children at the Grand Egyptian Museum. So what is interesting about this story also is Tutankhamun here is representing the first person interpreter. So he is the hero of the story, and he is telling the story of his discovery or the discovery of his tomb. To the bottom, we can see metal 10 or sweets 10. And this one was very famous, and you can see within the 1970s, every Egyptian house has this kind of metal tin to keep sweets or keep some different items than sweets. What is interesting about this tin that it's decorated with some very famous scenes from King Tutankhamun collections. Also, Tutankhamun collection, or as a king, he represents a kind of heritage promotion or tourism promotion or national pride for the Egyptian state. So to the right, we can see 3 stamps, and they were issued by Agman state, the United Arab Emirates, and it was celebrating the 50th anniversary of discovering King Tutankhamun tomb. And here we can explain how Tutankhamun also representing a kind of the soft power between the Egyptian state and the other states, even it's Arab or a foreigner states. To the left, we can see the magazine or Egypt Air magazine. Egypt Air is a national company for the airlines. And this magazine had been issued in 19 to also celebrate the 50th anniversary of discovering King Tutankhamun tomb. So inside the magazine, we can see the full story for how Howard Carter discovered the tomb and what is the magnificent treasures that he discovered and how they are currently or at this time displayed at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. So currently, about 28% of King Tutankhamun treasures had been moved to the new museum, the Grand Egyptian Museum, which is supposed to be opened next year, inshallah. So we are speaking about more than 5,000 pieces of artifact will be displayed or already had been installed inside 2 galleries on a space about 7,000 square meters. So within the galleries, we are displaying King Tutankhamun in 5 fundamental themes, which is the discovery of his tomb, his identity and his family tree, his lifestyle and how he lived as a royal child and a royal young king, then funeral, where we explaining maybe the series of his death or his illness and the series of preparing the body for his afterlife, or this second upcoming scene, which is afterlife, where we displaying all the afterlife treasures or artifacts which showcasing how this young king will live a very spiritual life in the afterlife. What is very interesting about King Tutankhamun displays at the Grand Egyptian Museum is the use of technologies and interactive devices and interactive display, where we are very keen to showcase the King Tutankhamun magnificent and what I can say extraordinary treasures in a very interactive way, as we would like to help the visitor to visit and get out from the Grand Egyptian Museum with our key message for King Tutankhamun, how he was a kind of extraordinary king or a unique king related to the, what is, I can say, the mystery of his life in ancient times and the significance of his treasures nowadays in modern Egypt and how he representing a kind of the face of the Egyptian identity. Thank you.
Thank you, Heba and Marie. Heba, I think it's fair to say that we're all anticipating the opening of this wonderful new display that you've just been showing us. I remember a few years ago seeing some of the objects being conserved at the Grand Museum. And I wonder, in the work you've been doing, studying these objects and the conservation, have there been any surprises? Have some unexpected things turned up among the treasures of Tutankhamun that you didn't know about?
Actually, yes, there's two things. One of the conservators who works on his textile belongings has discovered it was in a very actually it was a very bad condition. So after the conservation work, he discovered the name of King Tutankhamun was embroidered to the, what I can say, to the boundaries of his textile, in addition to the name of the maker of this textile. Another very good discovery also. One of our conservators was working on the legs of one of Tutankhamun pets, and the legs was for centuries in a black color. So when he started to clean the paws of the lion legs of the pet, he found the paws and the nails had been made from silver. So it was a magnificent actually discovery regarding this. This in addition to the conservation work on some pieces which had been already collected together and became one piece to discover it's a kind of magnificent pieces, such as the laser shield of King Tutankhamun, which had been recollected and conservated and restored. And the Grand Egyptian Museum has announced this magnificent work 1 year ago.
That's wonderful. Thank you. So still after 100 years, we're still learning more from the treasures.
I think that if I can just interrupt,
yes.
that's something quite completely amazing with this, all the objects that have been found in this tomb is there's just so much more that can be learned. And you know, what you were telling us about the silver that was discovered, it's something that is really fantastic. And I really wonder how much more we're going to really discover, and how much more it's going to tell us about you know, the manufacture at that time, but also the life of the people at that time.
Turning to Ahmed Nofal and his street art, when you talked to him, I think you asked him how modern Egyptians react. How do they respond to seeing these works of art in the street? It'd be interesting to hear a little bit more about that, and whether younger and older Egyptians have different perceptions of this kind of art.
Actually, yes, June, and this differences in reaction on this mural or this hip hop art is based on actually the age. So regarding the elderly people, they a little bit can't understand this kind of hip hop and contemporary art and the craziest things from their point of view. So they look at the ancient Egyptian heritage figures as a figures that deserve respect, and to display them in the same way we found them in tombs or in temples. So Ahmed told me that at first elder people get angry. Oh, we don't like what you are doing. How you recycling King Tut in this shape or this contemporary shape. But after speaking with them and explaining to them the idea of reimagining this amazing king in a very contemporary and modern manner, they start to, oh, okay, we can accept that, and they start to understand. While it's getting crazy with young people, because you know everything in this world nowadays is going very quickly, so they liked so much this mural and this graffiti, and they always very keen to take photos besides the graffiti because it's related to King Tut and Khamen. And some people start to search for more murals in Cairo, and Haram Street, which is very near to the three legendary pyramids, became one of the most important streets that integrate and combine a lot of amazing graffiti work with pharaonic symbols. So this difference at the end also lead us to one direction, which is King Tutankhamun or the ancient Egyptian figures, representing a very fundamental element for the Egyptian or modern Egyptians' identity and their sense of belonging to this civilization and this history.
And do you think that because Tutankhamun was a child king, does that give a special connection with children in Egypt today? Do they perceive him in a particular way as being similar?
I think yes, and I will tell you something because I have two sons, one of them in the 5th grade and the other one in the 4th grade. Within our history curriculum for the 2 years, I found that the King Tutankhamun is a used figure for teaching our children about the ancient Egyptian history. So in both grades, they are speaking about the great discovery of King Tutankhamun treasure and the origins of King Tutankhamun and his family and his heretic father or heretic king Akhenaten, while also they used King Tutankhamun also within this history columns to promote for the new museum, which is the Grand Egyptian Museum. So I was very amazed and was very happy at the same time for the using of this national figure to raise a kind of a new generation with who will be very aware about their country, their civilizations, their important history.
Great, thank you. So we have a number of questions which have been submitted by members of the audience. So I'm just going to read a couple of these out and we'll give responses. So the first question is, were there many creative responses in art or caricatures in the early years after the discovery in 1922? I think the answer to that is definitely yes. Within a very short time of the discovery, Tutankhamun related themes started to appear in Western art, particularly, and in design, especially in jewelry and cosmetics. You see a lot of this in advertisements in magazines of the time. And he also appears in cartoons. I can certainly think of several quite immediately that I've seen in journals like Punch magazine, which was quite a popular sort of humorous magazine of the time. And popular songs were written about him as well. There was a song called Old King Tut, which was very popular in the 1920s. And it's quite interesting, in fact, that these early responses envisage Tutankhamun as a mature or elderly man in the song, and also in some of the cartoons where he's represented. He's shown as a man, 50 or 60 years old. And this reflects the fact that even when the tomb was first discovered, so little was known about Tutankhamun that it was not realized that he had been a child king. And it was only when the mummy of the king was unwrapped and they discovered that he was only about 19 when he died, that aspect of his reign, that important facet of his life became known. Okay, so then there's a question here about the statue that we've been showing. What is the sculpture made from? And what was the statue made for? Marie, would you like to give a comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. The statue was made of a hard stone called granodiorite. And we don't know exactly where it was found, but it's quite likely to have been found in the context of a temple, very likely the temple of Karnak or the temple of Luxor, but I think Karnak is quite a good guess. So it would have been placed inside the temple, and we know that offerings had to be produced for the gods on a daily basis, and in a way, they were supposed to be offered to the king, to the gods by the king on a daily basis. But obviously the king couldn't be there every day to feed the gods. So a statue like that would have magically ensured the presence of the king inside the temple. And as I mentioned, there is this kind of offering table that is holding, and it's a way to have this offering process running within the temple on a daily basis. So that's probably how this statue came about. But as I said, we don't really know that much about its original context. And it's mainly based on the shape of the statue and its decoration. We can reach to that kind of conclusions.
Thank you. Another question is, do the features of pharaohs have enough individuality, certain of their specific identity. Most of them look very generic or idealized. Absolutely true that most of these sculptures are heavily idealized. They're not exact likenesses of these rulers, but each ruler seems to have had his artists create a kind of standard image for himself, although it would have been idealized. Nonetheless, most of them have distinctive features which allow us today to still recognize which king is represented. And in the case of Tutankhamun, he has a particular, rather chubby face with prominent cheeks and a prominent chin. The shape of his mouth is fairly distinctive. And when you look at that with other stylistic features, sculptures change over time, then it becomes possible to identify a great many of these rulers, even if the name is not preserved. Another question relates to the tomb. Was the tomb found intact? There's a suggestion it had been entered and robbed at least twice. That's quite true. The tomb was broken into shortly after the original burial. There seem to have been two separate robberies in which the thieves were targeting particular items, small portable items, as metal, and perhaps some of the valuable oils and unguents that were stored in some of the jars in the tomb. But in both these cases, the authorities who looked after the Valley of the Kings discovered the break-ins and tidied up the tomb and resealed the entrance. So once the second resealing had been done, then the tomb did remain completely undisturbed for 3,000 years. And the crucial part of the tomb, the burial chamber containing the king's body, had not been broached. That was completely undisturbed. We have another question about the paintings, the Ahmed's street art. The idea of using Tutankhamun's imagery in protests as well as for pride is understandable. Has it crowded out the images, for example, of more successful pharaohs such as Amenhotep III, or later leaders such as Saladin? Perhaps, Hebe, you might like to give us a comment.
Yeah.
Maybe, have we lost Hebe?
I'm not quite sure. Okay.
Okay. I don't know, Marie, if you have a view on that.
Yeah, I think Tutankhamun became quite prevalent in terms of the imagery, but I don't think he was the only one. Another one who appears quite regularly, as far as I know, is Nefertiti. And we have, for example, at the British Museum, a collection of modern Egypt artifacts, and Nefertiti is very, very prevalent on all those objects. That was really part of the daily life of Egyptians during the 20th century. And you can see the imagery of Nefertiti coming again and again. So I think there is really a sort of discrepancy between the life of those pharaohs and those individuals in the ancient past, and the connection that modern Egyptian would have made with those people nowadays. And I think the icon of Tutankhamun and Nefertiti really transcended in a way how they were perceived in the past. And I think that's what is quite interesting in a way, because I don't think Tutankhamun was particularly well perceived at the time. He was a child, as we all said. He was not very, I don't think he achieved that much during his reign, which was very short. but it's really since the discovery of this tomb that it became very prevalent in the imagery and in the iconography. And I think it's quite interesting how the two are, in a way, a bit disconnected.
Yes, yes, thank you. And then we have the last question about, oh, a second. Okay, we have one here. I heard that the famous mask may have been repurposed from use by a female owing to more female facial features and pierced earlobes. Who might be the woman from whom the mask was taken? Yes, there has been research, very detailed technical research on the gold mask. And indeed, it does appear that the face originally was a different one. And the Egyptologist Nicholas Reeves, I know, has proposed that the mask was originally made for Nefertiti. Nefertiti seems to have become ruler for a short period after the death of Akhenaten and before Tutankhamun. And it would appear that she had a number of objects made for her eventual burial as a pharaoh. So some of the objects, some of these objects were actually not used for her burial, but were then adapted for Tutankhamun. And so that is what the question refers to, that the mask may indeed have been made for Nefertiti, and that when it was changed and adapted to Tutankhamun, the original face would have been removed and a new face made of gold attached to the surrounding headdress. And then we do have one final one about Ahmed's street art and whether the colors that he used to represent the different individuals there reflect ancient Egyptian painting. In particular, that his rendition of Tutankhamun is based on the gold mask. Well, I think that's quite right, Marie, isn't it? That the mask is the principal inspiration for his main painting.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. So obviously, it's not necessarily reusing color of ancient Egyptian skin, but more on the mask itself. But he was really inspired by scenes that you can see in tombs and temples. And for example, when you come in room 3, the wall on the left, you have this kind of sand color, and that's really the color that you would have on the walls of Egyptian temples. So he really tried to get inspired by ancient Egyptian colors, but also using this really popping colors. And I think when he came here, he was not used to the different sprays that we had because they were not the same brands, and he was really happy with the color that he had here because they were very natural. Very naturalistic, and he was quite happy how they actually matched. For example, he was talking about the color of the sand, and he was very happy with how it actually matched the impression of sand that you have in Egypt in the sun, for example. I'm not sure it really answers the question, but
yeah, no, I think that's very appropriate. Yes, great. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our allotted time. So I would just like to thank our speakers, Marie and Heber. I'm afraid we seem to have lost Heber at the end, but I'd like to thank her very much, nonetheless, for her contribution, and to thank the audience for their very stimulating questions. And so it is now goodbye from the British. you.